All alive, subject to Roman rule. A desperate gesture from the past that resonates to this day in the Holy Land.
ABC News, this is a special edition of Nightline. This week in the Holy Land. Reporting from the old city of Jerusalem, here now, Ted Koppel.
It's Tuesday morning here in Jerusalem, a rather chilly Tuesday morning, but as you can see, a beautiful one. This panoramic shot is coming to you from one of our camera positions on the Mount of Olives. And as you look from the Mount of Olives, you are looking at the old city of Jerusalem. Since just after dawn, small clusters of Jews have been praying at the Western Wall. It's sometimes referred to as the Wailing Wall because so many tears have been shed there. We have come here for a variety of reasons. Principally, we hope to provide some context, historical, political, military, and religious, for the news stories that so dominate our headlines. It's been only a few days, after all, since Israelis celebrated the rebirth of their ancient nation, the 40th anniversary of the modern state of Israel. Only a few days since Israeli commandos penetrated Tunisian security and assassinated one of the PLO's top commanders, Abu Jihad. And we are 4.5 months into a new and terribly controversial cycle of violence between Israeli defense forces and frustrated Palestinians under Israeli occupation. Various parties to the controversy have urged and begged and warned us to be fair and objective. But as you will see over these next few days, fairness and objectivity in this part of the world are very much in the eyes of the beholder. We will do the best we can.
כך, בדיוק לפני שבוע, נפתח שבוע השידורים של טד קופל בירושלים. ערב טוב, גבירותיי ורבותיי. בדיעבד מתברר כי המהומה הייתה רק בירושלים. בארצות הברית שיעור הצפייה היה קטן יחסית והתגובות מעטות. בישראל התייחסו לטד קופל לפחות כמו לראש מדינה. ההסברה הישראלית הרשמית, האזרחית והצבאית התגייסה כדי להעביר באמצעותו לצופים בארצות הברית את המסר הישראלי חזק וברור. אבל כפי שנראה, הצופה האמריקני חזה בשני מסרים, בעוצמה כמעט שווה, מסר ציוני ובצמוד אליו מסר פלסטיני חזק ותקיף לא פחות. נייטליין הציג תמונה נכונה ומאוזנת. בתום שבוע המשדרים, איש לא בא אל טד קופל בטענות שנגרם לו עוול, איש לא טען שהציגו תמונה חד צדדית או תמונה מעוותת. הם מדדו את הזמנים שייחדו לכל אחד משני הצדדים בשעון עצר. הם איזנו את הדיווחים איזון מדויק. הם הציגו סימטריה מוחלטת בין ישראל ובין הפלסטינים. המסרים הוצגו באופנים אחדים, כתבות קצרות, ספוטים, כתבות ארוכות, דיונים, רעיונות, סרטי ארכיון, אנימציה של מחשבים. בעצם היה במשדרים כל מה שראוי להיאמר וכל מה שראוי להיראות במשדר טלוויזיה שעניינו ישראל והפלסטינים. הנה דוגמה, שתי כתבות רקע, הכוח הישראלי והכוח הפלסטיני.
National security is every country's concern. It is Israel's obsession. This documentary was prepared by the Israeli army to emphasize that their security fears are based on a legitimate sense of vulnerability.
In less than 60 seconds, the capital, Jerusalem, is under attack. 40 seconds later, Ben Gurion Airport, our lifeline with the outside world. In less than 4 minutes, Tel Aviv, the coastline. These are the hair-trigger margins with which we live.
Even today, with its occupied territories, Israel is only about the size of New Jersey, a mere 125 miles and 12 seconds flying time from Saudi Arabia's major airfield, 43 miles and 6 seconds from the Jordanian Air Force, 40 miles and 6 seconds from Syria. Outgunned by Arab armies more than 3 to 1, Israel concentrates its forces along its borders, Lebanon and the Golan Heights in the north, the Negev Desert in the south, and along the Jordan River and surrounding mountains on the West Bank. What you can see up here on a clear day, and this isn't, is the Jordan Valley down there in the east. That collection of buildings barely visible through the haze is Jericho. Up there in the Judean hills to the west is Jerusalem. What you cannot see even on the clearest of days is what the Israelis call the line of national consensus. In a land where political disagreement is almost a national pastime, there is, on these 3 points at least, agreement. No Israeli talks of giving up Jerusalem. And then, for reasons of security, they insist that they must hold on to the Jordan Valley because of its access to Jerusalem. And further north, the third point of national consensus, the Golan Heights. They took the heights from Syria in 1967 during the Six-Day War. They almost lost them again during the Yom Kippur War of 1973. And after a costly war in Lebanon, they are adamant about maintaining what is generally conceded to be among the most effective armies and one of the best air forces in the world. Much of the money to buy the weapons and train the men comes from U.S. foreign aid, $3 billion a year. It is not, the Israelis insist, U.S. charity.
Israel is the only solid ally in the Middle East to the United States. Unconditional friendship. Israel is a friend in need, a friend in peace, and a friend when it comes to war, God forbid.
According to the U.S. Defense Department, the Israeli Air Force could wipe out Soviet naval forces in the Mediterranean in a matter of minutes. The Israelis have provided our first look at Soviet weaponry captured from a variety of Arab armies, including the sophisticated SAM-6 missile and a top-secret MiG-21 jet. And Israeli intelligence continues to provide some of the most useful information available to Washington on Middle Eastern terrorism. But Israel's close association with the United States is, especially these days, a mixed blessing. When the Israelis assassinated Abu Jihad in Tunis a few days ago, and while there has been no official comment, privately Israeli officials can barely conceal their pride in how smoothly the mission went, Palestinian resentment was also directed against Israel's perceived sponsor, the United States. In the occupied territories of Gaza and the West Bank, it has not escaped Palestinian notice that Israeli troops drive American jeeps, carry American rifles, fire American-made rubber bullets and tear gas grenades. They look tough, and they are. Ask the Egyptian veteran or the Syrian, and yes, these days ask the Palestinian citizens of these West Bank communities. But the mission that Israeli troops face these days is infinitely more complex and troubling than any they have faced before. Ask their senior commander.
You cannot control almost 1 million people by using force. You have to give them something.
Ask the soldier on the street.
I mean, there's no winner in this war. We're both losing.
These people we're looking at over here, are they possibly your enemy? I mean, could it be that a little boy like that could be trouble for you?
Actually, I'm not looking at them as an enemy. They're little children. They're living their life. They're cute.
Cute, but also suspect. And we must not forget that an estimated 170 Palestinians, children among them, have died. This is a new kind of war for Israeli troops, one in which their superior firepower and superb training count for little. They walk an incredibly precarious tightrope. Not tough enough, and they lose control. Too tough, and they make enemies of the uncommitted. The problem is you may so radicalize them that you end up with more enemies than before.
This is one of the dangers of this situation.
The conclusion is that sometimes power becomes powerless, that you cannot solve everything with your might, with your military might. You have your F-15s and the best manpower maybe, you have your artillery and thousands of tanks, but you cannot solve everything with your military means.
Later in our broadcast, we'll be joined live by Israeli Defense Minister Yitzhak Rabin. But first, when we come back, a profile of the Palestine Liberation Organization and its origins, followed by Bassem Abu Sharif, official spokesman for the PLO, live from Tunis.
To the Arabs, this division of the Holy Land brought ruin and exile. Scattered in the surrounding countries, you will see them, 1 million homeless people, even here on the hillsides of Bethlehem.
The homeless Palestinians ended up in refugee camps in Jordan, Gaza, Syria, and Lebanon. Tens of thousands were driven out by the Israelis. Hundreds of thousands left for other reasons. Some fled in fear. Some were ordered out by Arabs. Some left believing they would soon return with conquering Arab armies. They created a Palestinian diaspora.
There is misery and distress at every hand. Here in Bethlehem, children are being brought into the world to live in cellars, under arches, in vaults, or any space that affords some shelter from the elements.
The loss of the war and the exile of the refugees created a powerful motive for vengeance and a return to the land. In 1964, the PLO was formed as the parent organization for Palestinian guerrilla groups dedicated to armed struggle against Israel. A leader soon emerged, an engineer by education, a revolutionary nationalist by profession. His followers call him Abu Ammar. The world knows him as Yasser Arafat. Over the years, Arafat has become the embodiment of Palestinian dreams for independence. His enemies see him as a ruthless terrorist. In either case, he is an extraordinary survivor. In 1970, the Jordanian army moved to crush the PLO in the battles of Black September. Arafat and his organization survived. In 1982, the Israeli army invaded Lebanon in an attempt to destroy the PLO. Arafat and his troops withdrew. In 1985, the Israelis bombed the PLO headquarters in Tunisia. Arafat narrowly escaped. The internal struggles within the PLO are often as deadly as the guerrilla war against Israel. Moderate PLO leaders like Issam Sartawi have been murdered. The PLO includes a dozen different factions with different leaders, different ideologies, and different tactics. Arafat's own group, Al-Fatah, is the largest and most powerful faction in the PLO, a military, political, and social organization of over 10,000 members. The PLO spends hundreds of millions of dollars a year, most of it donated by wealthy Arab governments like Saudi Arabia. But how representative is the PLO?
For the vast majority of the Palestinians, wherever they may be, the PLO is regarded as the sole legitimate representative of them as a people.
And what are the PLO's ultimate goals? Do Palestinians is the PLO?
For the vast majority of the Palestinians, wherever they may be,
National Covenant calls for the liquidation of the Zionist presence in Palestine. It says the establishment of Israel is fundamentally invalid and a total liberation of Palestine through armed revolution.
official PLO policy regards Palestinian self-determination as relating to the entire territory of Palestine.
Including Israel.
Including what is presently Israel within the 1967 boundaries.
I believe that in people's hearts, among Palestinians' hearts, they would say Israel should not be there, that there was a basic injustice done to the Palestinian people by establishing Israel. So if you ask them their gut feelings, you will get that kind of an answer. If you ask them a more pragmatic question as to what they think is feasible and what they can live with as a solution, then I think you will get a practical answer that yes, there should be a state alongside Israel and that yes, they can live in peace with Israel.
For the PLO, the time for living at peace with Israel has not yet come. It is living at war with Israel. Its young recruits come from the refugee camps that have surrounded Israel like a firestorm for 40 years. Palestinians see violence against Israel not as terror, but as heroic action. The rest of the world sees the PLO not so much for its dreams, but by its deeds.
When we return, we'll be joined by PLO spokesman Bassam Abu Sharif.
Nightline, live in the Holy Land, will continue in a moment.
הפסקה לפרסומת. אם כן, איזון. האיזון נשמר גם בדיווחים אודות הפוליטיקה הפנימית בישראל. לקראת הבחירות בנובמבר, נייטליין מציג את הטוענים לכתר השלטון בישראל. הצגה סימטרית, שניים מכל צד, רבין ופרס, שמיר ושרון. מדוע שרון? משום שרבין ישנו בצד השני. מדוע רבין? משום ששרון נמצא בצד השני. מדוע לא דוד לוי? פשוט משום שאין מכירים אותו בארצות הברית.
But as the Palestinian uprising continues into its fifth month, many Israelis are hoping that a new, powerful leader will emerge. Here are the candidates. Yitzhak Rabin of the Labor Party, now defense minister with the responsibility for putting down the Palestinian uprising.
By military means only, we cannot solve the problem. Solution by negotiations.
He has broad experience as former chief of staff, ambassador to Washington, and then prime minister. Critics say he lacks the charisma needed to be a great leader. Shimon Peres, the Labor Party leader and Rabin's political rival. Former prime minister, now foreign minister, who leads the battle for the U.S. International Peace Conference plan.
And the continuation of the present situation is a real agony for all parties concerned.
Detractors say Peres caters too much to Washington. Yitzhak Shamir, the Likud party chief, now prime minister, and a right-wing hardliner since he led underground fighters before the state was born.
Who are these people of the PLO? It's a gang of terrorists with a clear, violent ideology.
Many think Israel needs a more flexible leader. Then there's Ariel Sharon, military hero, former defense minister who led Israel into the disastrous Lebanon invasion, now trade minister. He wants to be prime minister and takes the hardest line of all.
But I think that everyone knows my position for many years, that we have to annihilate the commanders of the PLO terrorist organizations.
Opponents call him a demagogue who would destroy Israel's democracy. When the Israeli people vote for their new leader in November, they'll be faced with a critical decision. Which road will they take into the future? That of territorial compromise or of the hard line that won't give an inch? One government official who is deeply involved says he thinks that the next battle for the Knesset, Israel's parliament, will be the most important and the most bitter and emotional campaign in Israel's history. Bill Siemens for Nightline in Jerusalem.
המשדר הארוך והחשוב ביותר הוקרן בארצות הברית ביום שלישי שעבר בלילה. בישראל היה זה יום רביעי בבוקר. דיון שנמשך קצת יותר מ3 שעות בתיאטרון ירושלים. על הבמה ישבו 4 חברי כנסת, 2 ימין, 2 שמאל, ו3 פלסטינים, 2 אנשי אקדמיה ועסקן מרצועת עזה. באולם היו כ600 מוזמנים, רובם יהודים, מיעוטם פלסטינים, מקצתם מרצועת עזה.
They have come to the Jerusalem Theater to be with other Palestinians from the West Bank and Israeli Jews for an unprecedented live televised forum. This, tragically, is what we've come to expect when we talk about Israeli-Palestinian confrontation, a dialogue of violence.
It shows that they are vicious, they are people that cannot be trusted, they are people who are thirsty for blood.
If we throw stones, they use their machine guns, those terrorists.
Those dogs that are standing there, there is no such thing as an Arab village in the state of Israel. It is a Jewish village that is temporarily inhabited by Arabs.
The only reason that we want our homeland, the only reason that we want to live free.
For just a few hours at least, we want to engage in a more productive kind of dialogue. Joining me on the stage of the Jerusalem Theater, a panel of 4 Palestinian community leaders and 4 leading Israeli officials. It is just after 6:30 in the morning here. What you are about to see is live.
From ABC News, this is a special edition of Nightline. In the Holy Land, a town meeting. Reporting live from the Henry Crown Symphony Hall in Jerusalem. Here now, Ted Koppel.
A couple of points to begin with. No one is here tonight to negotiate. Everyone is here at our direct invitation. It has been suggested to me that if we truly understood what we are trying here today, we would never have done it. There's probably some truth to that. If anyone in this audience has come here today determined to disrupt, to prevent, rather than encourage dialogue, that won't be difficult. If all of you are determined to satisfy only your constituencies at home, to say only those things that your neighbors will applaud, we'll have to live with that. Many, but not all, in our American television audience will appreciate how much courage it took for some of you to come here. I'm not suggesting that you speak without passion. This, after all, is your future and the lives of your children that we're discussing. You may have noticed this little fence that I'm sitting on here. It has been suggested to me, and it is perhaps symbolic of the delicacy with which the negotiations proceeded just to bring this panel together and to bring this audience together, but it has been suggested to me that we need a symbolic divider between our Israeli guests on the one hand and our Palestinian guests on the other. I must tell you that it has been so difficult to arrange this broadcast that was one small price that we were prepared to pay. So here it is. I will try and spend as much time on one side as on the other. Let me, in fact, as I move across our fence right now, let me go immediately to one of our panelists, and I'm going to be introducing our panelists as we go along rather than going all the way around here.
You cannot equate stone throwing, which is essentially a symbolic act, with the military machine, with the might of the rubber bullets, which people say don't hurt, with tear gas that we've all experienced that can cause miscarriages as well as deaths, with live ammunition. Do you call that parity in a situation like that?
It's not parity, but if someone is confronting me with a slingshot, as I said a moment ago, I may lose some of the sense of symbolism there.
But why are you there?
How can they talk to you when they regard you as their occupiers, their enemies, when they see the only side of Israel that they see is the clenched fist?
First of all, why don't you remove this fence? We don't need this fence. Who needs this fence?
The Palestinians need this fence.
If they need it, I know that maybe they need it. We don't need it. I don't need it. The Israelis don't need this fence. If there is one thing that is sure, that is definitive, is that in this country, Arabs and Jews will have to live together, precisely as they will have to live forever together in the Middle East. There's no other choice. So we don't need this fence.
We have one more guest on our Israeli panel yet to be introduced, Dedi Zucker, a member of the Knesset since 1986. He serves on the Budget and Finance Committee. He is an activist for human rights in the occupied territories and a founder of Peace Now, an Israeli peace group begun in 1978. When you hear the voices of Palestinians, as we just heard them, some of them fairly extreme, others saying, we don't want to push you into the sea, don't you push us into the desert. There sounds like hope there. Is there hope?
I think that their leadership is our problem, just like our leadership is their problem. And there is a hope while we have this show with Ted Koppel.
No, look, one of the things I really want to do at this point, early on, we're not going to negotiate any settlements here tonight. What I hope we can do is at least find, if there are areas of common ground at all, and I suspect that it might be easier to find common ground with you than it would be with Ehud here, but, you know, we'll see.
Don't be so sure. Protest.
Go ahead, protest.
They are great speakers about peace. We are the makers of peace. The Likud made peace, and the Likud will make peace in the Middle East.
Right away.
Well, if the Likud will make peace on the same ground that they made peace with Egypt, I will agree. But you want to make peace on a base of not giving up even one inch in sea.
You'll hear me.
You didn't make it in Egypt.
You'll hear me.
אלה היו קטעים ארוכים מן הפתיחה שהייתה באווירה נינוחה. אחר כך לפרקים התחממו קצת הרוחות. דיון מעמיק לא היה שם. רוב הזמן כולם הטיפו מוסר לכולם. דיברו בסיסמאות, דו-שיח של חרשים. טד קופל שלט את... הישראלים אמרו, הנה עצם העובדה שאתם רשאים להתבטא בפומבי, מוכיחה כי הכיבוש איננו נורא. במהלך הדיון הארוך, שהיה מייגע לעתים, שולבו כתבות רקע ותשדירי שירות. הנה כיצד מסבירים לאזרח אמריקני עובדות יסוד. גודלו של המזרח התיכון והמרחקים בין המדינות ובין הבירות. שימו לב לביצוע הטכני של הקטע הקצר הזה.
To get a better idea of distances in the Middle East, let's look at the map of the United States. Cairo, Egypt would be where Louisville, Kentucky is. Tel Aviv would be near Columbus, Ohio, with Jerusalem and Amman, Jordan to the east. Beirut, Lebanon would be up by Cleveland, and Damascus, Syria near Youngstown, Ohio. Baghdad, Iraq would be close to New York City. By jet, most of these capitals are within minutes of each other. The closest, Jerusalem and Amman, only 43 miles apart.
המזרח התיכון על מפת ארצות הברית, אבל כמובן שהעניין הזה של המרחקים הוא שולי בהחלט. במרכז, במשך כל השבוע, הייתה התקוממות בשטחים. זה היה העניין המרכזי ב4 מתוך 5 התוכניות, וזה היה העניין המרכזי גם במהלכו של הדיון הארוך שצולם בתיאטרון ירושלים ביום רביעי.
An Israeli army night patrol in hostile territory, the Kasbah in Nablus.
When you walk at night, it's frightening. It's terrifying.
The site of frequent bloody clashes, Nablus can be trouble waiting to happen.
There are all these doors which are black. You can't see it. If a person is standing there, you can't see him. It's dangerous.
Tension is always high here, day or night. The worry is simple and straightforward.
I think about the 2x4 that's going to land on my head. That's what I think about. So I'm looking, you know, they throw these huge cement blocks and huge boulders. You know, they're not throwing little rocks.
Few of them want this duty, but it's their mission now, to carve calm out of chaos, to persevere. One soldier has been shot to death. Many others have been injured in countless street battles, and almost all have endured the taunts of their adversaries.
I know they hate us. Maybe they have a reason, maybe they don't. I don't know, but the fact is they hate us.
The young Israeli soldiers had to deal with a stream of changing, at times conflicting orders, as his government groped for the proper response to a civil insurrection. Live ammunition, then tear gas or rubber bullets, mace against women, even unlikely weapons firing rocks or marble, all have been tried. They've been told to shoot, then told to beat, and they followed orders as the whole world watched, often disapprovingly, over the shoulders of the strongest army in the Middle East. The warrior trained for battle with the Arab armies has had to adapt to the uncomfortable role of policeman. But Israeli commanders say their men have made the transition.
We deal with the problem better than in the beginning. We are more equipped, for example, and they are getting tired more and more.
One thing that may have caused the exhaustion is the use of curfews in which whole populations are confined to their homes for days or weeks. Ze'ev Livni, who commands the northern West Bank, has imposed curfews on the city of Nablus. A 25-year Army veteran, he admits the quiet is artificial, but sees his job as buying time for Israel's political leaders.
This is the goal of the army here, to enable the government to reach a political solution, not under stress, not under violence.
It is the soldier who takes the stress and violence upon himself, while the people of Tel Aviv and Jerusalem go on about their lives. Like other soldiers throughout history, it is the most he can do.
It's fighting for the life of the nation, for the peace here, and for the life of friends.
This is Dean Reynolds for Nightline in the Israeli-occupied West Bank.
בין הכתבות ובין התשדירים והפרסומות דיברו על עונשים קולקטיביים, על טרנספר, על טרור נגד נשים וילדים. רוב הזמן לא דיברו אלה לאלה, ורק לעתים נדירות מאוד יכול היה הבימאי לאמת את שני הצדדים באופן ישיר.
For God's sake, we have a golden opportunity. 1.5 million Palestinians are standing up at this moment, saying no. We're not fighting a war.
What do you say yes
we
for?
didn't wage a war.
What do you say yes for?
We're saying no to the
Yes
Israeli
for the
occupation
liquidation
and
of
yes
Israel.
for a balanced peace, a genuine
What do
peace.
you mean a balanced peace?
A balanced
What is
peace,
a balanced peace?
A balanced peace can be judged. First of all, we have to decide who would go to the negotiating table because I cannot deliver to you.
Now,
You
what
know, from
is
all
your
parties,
opinion?
From
You
all
are a
parties.
free citizen. I'm a free citizen. I have opinion about the peace. What is your opinion about peace?
My peace is the opportunity for me to live within my own secure boundaries.
What about me? What kind of boundaries?
The boundaries that should be decided on the international
What
conference.
is your opinion about boundaries?
You know,
I have opinion about boundaries. What is yours?
In the 18th PNC conference, it states clearly that the establishment of a Palestinian state in the West Bank and Gaza, including Jerusalem. Those are my boundaries. All right? Come on. From all people in the world. And I know that I'm talking to the, I'm talking to the American public, but I should talk to the Jewish public. From all people in the world. The unique history of the Jews of Spain in the 15th century. In France, the Dreyfus affair, they were not allowed to enter Britain in the 17th century because they were Jewish. In 1882, the Tsarist Russia, 6 million Jews were burned alive because they simply were Jewish. We have lost 234 lives. But at the end, you have lost the uniqueness of your history. You have a leadership that's politically blind. And anybody who comes and talk about the Jewish values now, where are they? Are they with deportation, the applicability of the Ottoman laws, the British mandatory laws, the Jordanian laws? Am I a human being or not? Yeah. You know, Hitler, excuse me, I hate Hitler more than any of you. I was on his list too. I was on his list too.
See, Mr. Arakat, I was born in Jaffa. And according to your covenant, I have no right to stay there. This is my homeland, Jaffa. It's your homeland, maybe. Don't try to go back to history. Those Jewish people that are trying to go to Hebron, I am telling them, don't go there. And I'm saying the same to the Arabs that want to go back to Jaffa. But Habash wants Jaffa, he wants Haifa. And I'm afraid that he is the one that dictates to the all PLO leadership his position, including Arafat. And your task, and many people in the occupied territories, in the West Bank, is to tell the leadership that is out of the West Bank and the Gaza Strip that you want to come to a compromise, that you want to press them to bring an end to the bloodshed and terrorism. You can't say the PLO is our leadership point.
Mr. Ben-Elissar, and then we will come back to the Palestinian panel, and then I want to go up to a question.
We witnessed a regrettable manifestation of intransigence, of extremism, from an intellectual Palestinian, a university professor. What should I think of some of those Palestinians who are engaged in terrorism, in killing? No, I am not a man who is frightened or who is easily frightened. But listening to the words and the way of delivering of Professor Arakat, may I tell the audience that I am tonight frightened. This is the violent Middle East. And this is a violent Arab side and Arab world.
לפרקים ניסה קופל לשלב את הקהל בדיון. בשתי הפינות העליונות של האולם הוצבו מיקרופונים והקהל התבקש לנצל את האפשרות ולהציג שאלות. רוב הדוברים שאלו שאלות מוזמנות או שאלות רטוריות או הכריזו הכרזות. רק במקרה אחד הוצגה שאלה ישירה והיה עימות מסוים בין השואל ובין המשיב.
And what we're going to try and do is just take a couple of quick questions, a couple of quick answers, then we're going to reduce the problem about the only way it can be reduced to human terms, and then we're going to bid you all good night. Go ahead, please.
My name is Tawfiq Murar. Since we are running out of time, I make my question very short. For the last 20 years, since the Israeli and the Arab war conflict started, every act has been committed by the Palestinians is stamped and labeled by the Israelis as terrorism. But for heaven's sake, what about the Israeli actions? I do not want to recall the actions that the Israeli committed since 1948 till now. I just want to mention the last 5 actions. What about the downing of the Libyan jetliners, civilian jetliners in the 70s? What about the blasting of the Iraqi nuclear reactor in the 1980? What about the Israeli invasion of Lebanon in 1982? What about the blasting of the PLO offices in Tunis? What the last one, what about the assassination of Abu Jihad 10 days ago? And the last instance, what about the daily raids on southern Lebanon? I want to direct, please, my question to the hardliner, Mr. Olmert.
Okay. In this context, I must say I'm proud to be a hardliner. Of all the actions that you have mentioned, which the Israeli government officially accepted responsibility, I'm very proud of. I'm very proud that we destroyed the atomic reactor in Iraq. Thank God we did it. Thank God. Thank God that we had the courage and the determination to destroy something which could have become the source of the greatest tragedy of the Jewish people after the Holocaust. We will fight, as I said before, terror and all those who are responsible for terror. We certainly made mistakes in this long history. Maybe many people who were not supposed to be hurt by this war were hurt, and I regret every loss of life of a Palestinian people. We deeply regret the loss of life of innocent civilians. However, I never heard from your people and from you leaders any acceptance of responsibility for the killing, a continuous and consistent killing of thousands of Israeli civilians, because for you it's a policy and a way of life. We regret every such case. However, we are very proud of every act of self-defense which removed a danger for the state of Israel, such as the atomic reactor.
All right, go ahead.
But Mr. Olmert, why you call the Palestinian acts terrorism and the Israeli acts is secured borders?
I'll tell you why. Because when a terrorist organization is aiming at unarmed civilians, or when a terrorist organization is picking up an American innocent Jew on a killer lorry, this is pure terrorism. This is the essence of terrorism. When you attack Jews or non-Jews or tourists to come to Israel at Roma airport and Vienna airport, this is pure terrorism. When the Israeli army, in an act of self-defense, attacks an atomic reactor, which is preparing a nuclear bomb that is to be used against the state of Israel, this is a legitimate act of self-defense, and we are proud of it.
הניסיון הטלוויזיוני המעניין ביותר נעשה בתוכנית הראשונה. תחקירנים וכתבים עמלו במשך חודשים אחדים על הכנת היסטוריה מצולמת, מפורטת ומדויקת של תולדות הסכסוך בארץ ישראל. גם פה נעשה מאמץ גדול לאזן את התמונה, לייחד לצד היהודי והערבי זמן שווה. מפאת מגבלות זמן לא נקרין את הסרט כולו. הנה קטעים אחדים, מעורבים בתשדירי פרסומת, כמו זו שמאחוריי, כנהוג בטלוויזיה האמריקנית. הנה תקציר המדגים את אופן הצגת ההיסטוריה של ההתיישבות הציונית בארץ ישראל מחד גיסה, ושל גורל הפלסטינים מאידך גיסה.
Before you watch what comes next, you need to understand that we assigned our correspondents the task of reporting the modern history of Palestine and Israel from the vantage points of Palestinians and Jews. These are not, nor were they intended to be, objective reports. At times, the two versions are irreconcilable. That's the point. It's part of what the struggle here is about. James Walker reports the Palestinian version of recent history, Judd Rose, the Jewish version.
In the morning, they wept. As sirens wailed across the land, the people of Israel fell silent in memory of those who died to create and defend the Jewish state. And in the evening, they danced. In Israel, the end of Memorial Day means the start of Independence Day. And last week, Israelis celebrated their 40 years as a nation. From silent grief to joyous abandon, and all in a day.
Sorrow and joy are mixed up in Israeli life. We go from sorrow today to joy tomorrow. There's no other way you can live here. But it's the best place in the world for a Jew to live.
There is a Palestinian proverb that says, if you have no land, you have no honor. To the Palestinians, the issue has always been land. In 1917, Palestinians demonstrated against the Balfour Declaration and British support for a Jewish homeland. After all, they then represented some 90% of the population here. Yet the Balfour Declaration had in effect called them intruders, referring to them as the existing non-Jewish communities in Palestine.
The Jews of Palestine were thinking not of conquest, but defense after a decade of Arab violence. 1929, a dispute over use of the Western Wall leads Arab mobs to attack Jerusalem's Jewish quarter. Quickly, the violence spreads to other towns and settlements.
The Arabs burned all the village, and you can see half of the horizon with fire. I remembered I was a kid. I remembered I wouldn't forget it.
None of the Jews would. The attacks were cruel and bloody. In Hebron alone, 60 Jews were killed.
For many centuries before Zionism brought Jews to Palestine, Arabs had lived on this land, and it was the land the United Nations partition took away.
The holy city of Jerusalem is a scene of bloodshed and terror as the United Nations division of Palestine inflames violence between Arab and Jew. Burning, shooting, and pillaging mark the beginning of the partitioning.
To the Palestinians in November 1947, partitioning called for civil war because under the UN agreement, the Jews, who occupied only 6.5% of Palestine, were given control of 55% of the land.
For Jews around the world, it was a moment of biblical scope. The promise had been kept. A nation was born, but conceived in blood, Jewish blood.
The Arabs did not accept the partition of Palestine. They wanted all of Palestine.
The civil war was brutal. The Arabs matched the Jews blood for blood. 4 days after Deir Yassin, a medical convoy was ambushed. 77 doctors and nurses were massacred by the Arabs.
Palestinians seldom talk of the year 1948. Instead, they refer to it simply as Nakba, the year of the catastrophe. Between 1948 and 1950, Israel systematically destroyed 379 of 475 Arab villages, bulldozing or dynamiting homes and leveling the land.
וכך נמשך הדיווח ההיסטורי הזה, פעם מגן דוד, פעם פלסטין, מהצהרת בלפור ועד היום, מאוזן, אולי פרט לאלבינוני שליווה את הקטעים הפלסטינים. כל קטע מהקטעים שהראינו היה ארוך הרבה יותר, אנחנו הכנו קיצור. הסיום כדרכם של האמריקנים היה אנושי, אופטימי, מעין happy end חלקי. סיפורו של עץ הלימון.
One of the prayers of Zakiya Carey will not be answered in her lifetime. She is 78 now, and though she lives in the occupied West Bank, she would rather be in Ramla, where she was born, in the house her late husband built. But Ramla is in Israel, and Mrs. Carey is Palestinian. So, like many others, she cannot return to her old home. Ahmed Carey built the house in Ramla with his own hands and helped raise a family of 10 children. The first son was named Bashir. In the backyard of his house, Mr. Carey planted a lemon tree.
Because he planted this lemon tree, it has a special idea about it, you see.
When I plant a tree and irrigate it every day and take care of it every day, it becomes like a son of mine. I think that feeling was the same for the father of Bashir.
In 1948, during Israel's War of Independence, the Carey family was forced to leave Ramla by advancing Israeli soldiers.
They were calling, you have to go to Ramallah, you have to go to Abdullah with the loudspeakers, you must leave the town. We walked through the mountains. You can't imagine how difficult it was. It's like hell.
A family of Jewish immigrants moved into the house. Their daughter was named Dahlia.
It was an Arab house, a spacious Arab house with high ceilings, big windows, a courtyard around it, and it had a wonderful lemon tree, which was always fruitful. And as a child, I used to have animals in the courtyard. I used to plant things around, and it was like an enclosed, really very protected paradise for me.
Bashir Carey, who was born in the house, went back to visit in 1967 and became friends with Dahlia. She offered to give the house back to him.
I felt that somebody had to make the first step to recognize, to acknowledge the sins of the past, and both sides had sinned against each other.
But a few years later, Bashir was sent to prison for a terrorist bombing in which 2 people died.
So even then I realized that this person with whom I had such a bond through the house in Ramle, which was my home and his home, this person was also my enemy.
You have to fight for your right. You have to fight for your right. This, Dalia calls it terrorism. But most of the Palestinians does not call it terrorism.
Early this year, Bashir and 3 other Palestinians were deported by Israel to Lebanon. They were given a hero's welcome. The next day, an open letter from Dalia to Bashir was published in Israel.
Dear Bashir, we got to know each other 20 years ago under unusual and unexpected circumstances. Ever since, we have become part of each other's lives. I appeal to both Palestinians and Israelis to understand that the use of force will not resolve this conflict on its fundamental level. This is the kind of war that no one can win, and either both peoples will achieve liberation or neither will.
The house in Ramla is being rented now. Neither Bashir's family nor Dalia's lives there anymore. The lemon tree that brought such pleasure to both families bears little fruit these days. Its branches have been cut back, but the tree itself is not dead. John Lawrence for Nightline in Jerusalem.
היו במשדרים רעיונות אחדים עם אישים ישראלים ועם אישים פלסטינים. ראש הממשלה שמיר אומת עם צילומים של ילדים פלסטינים שטענו טענות קשות נגד ישראל. דובר אש"ף רואיין בשידור ישיר מתוניס, שר החוץ ושר הביטחון כמובן, ואנשי אקדמיה אחדים משני הצדדים. בסך הכל זה היה שבוע של שואו, כמו שאומרים האמריקנים. לא שואו ישראלי ואף לא שואו פלסטיני. שואו של טד קופל, שרשם לעצמו הישג, מפגש בינלאומי ראשון, ממוסד, רשמי, בברכת ישראל, של פלסטינים ושל ישראלים. כך זה בטלוויזיה, עצם השידור הוא המסר. אנחנו קיצרנו יותר מ10 שעות ל45 דקות, גם אנחנו השתדלנו להיות מאוזנים. עד כאן גבירותיי ורבותיי, מהדורה מורחבת של מבט שני על משדרי נייטליין מירושלים. תודה שהייתם איתנו, ערב טוב.